You haven't been truly bored in years. Think about that. Every waiting room has a phone. Every commute has a podcast. Every meal has a scroll. Every moment of potential silence has been pre-filled with something, anything, to prevent the specific discomfort of having nothing to consume. You have engineered boredom out of your life so completely that you have forgotten what it felt like. And in doing so, without realizing it, without choosing it consciously, you have engineered out something else entirely. Something Carl Jung spent his life trying to protect. Today we go into what that is. 1. What boredom actually is, and what we have confused it with. Modern culture has made boredom into an enemy, a problem to be solved, a discomfort to be immediately relieved, a signal that something has gone wrong, that the environment is failing to provide sufficient stimulation, that the content is inadequate, that a better option must exist somewhere in the feed. This is a profound misunderstanding. And it is one that Jung, writing decades before the smartphone existed, would recognize immediately as a symptom of something much larger than a preference for entertainment. Boredom, in Jung's psychological framework, is not the absence of stimulation. It is the presence of the interior, the specific, uncomfortable, fertile experience of the psyche beginning to surface, of the deeper layers of the self pushing upward toward consciousness, in the absence of the noise that normally keeps them submerged. The restlessness you feel in genuine boredom is not the restlessness of an environment that has failed you. It is the pressure of everything you have been too busy to feel, think, create, or confront, finally finding the conditions in which it can rise. Boredom is not emptiness. It is fullness, pushing toward the surface. And the person who immediately relieves it, who grabs the phone the moment the pressure begins to build, is not solving a problem. They are preventing something from arriving that needed to arrive. 2. The psychological function of doing nothing. Jung made a distinction that modern productivity culture has almost completely erased: the distinction between rest and receptivity. Rest is the recovery of depleted capacity, sleep, vacation, the deliberate reduction of demand so that the system can restore itself. Receptivity is something different and rarer. It is the specific psychological state in which the conscious mind, ordinarily occupied with managing, planning, producing, performing, relaxes its grip on the interior enough that something from beneath it can come through. The insight that arrives in the shower, the solution that appears during a walk with no destination, the creative idea that surfaces in the specific unguarded moment between waking and sleeping. These are not accidents. They are the predictable result of the conscious mind momentarily releasing its control, creating a gap through which the unconscious can deliver what it has been preparing below the threshold of awareness. Jung observed across decades of clinical work that this gap, this specific, unstructured, unstimulated receptive space, is not a luxury. It is the primary channel through which the deeper layers of the psyche communicate with consciousness. And the person who has eliminated every gap, who has filled every unstructured moment with content, with noise, with the endless provision of external stimulus, has not simply made themselves more productive or more entertained. They have closed the channel. The unconscious is still there, still preparing, still attempting to deliver. But the delivery cannot land because the address is always occupied. 3. What you have buried in the noise. Here is the specific question Jung's framework forces you to ask. What is the noise preventing from arriving? Because the noise is not neutral. It is not simply filling time that would otherwise be empty. It is filling time that would otherwise be occupied by something specific. Something your particular psyche, with its particular history, its particular unresolved material, its particular unlived potential, has been trying to surface for months, for years, sometimes for decades. For some people, it is grief, the loss that was never given space to be fully felt, because every quiet moment was immediately filled before it could arrive. For some people, it is a question about direction, the growing awareness, suppressed beneath the productivity and the content and the busy schedule, that something about the life as currently constructed is not quite right. For some people, it is creativity, the specific, unglamorous, often surprising creative intelligence that does not operate on demand, that cannot be scheduled or optimized or productivity hacked into existence, but that arrives, reliably and abundantly, whenever genuine unstructured space is allowed to exist. For some people, it is the shadow, the suppressed, denied, unintegrated material that the noise keeps successfully submerged, until the quiet finally comes and it surfaces, often uncomfortably, often in the form of feelings that seem disproportionate to their apparent trigger. Jung was precise about this. The thing the noise is preventing is not generic, it is personal, specific, yours. And it will not be known until the noise stops long enough for it to arrive. 4. The creativity that only boredom produces. This is the section most relevant to anyone who creates anything. And in the broadest sense, everyone creates something: a life, a relationship, a career, a way of being in the world. All of it is creation. All of it benefits from what only boredom can provide. Jung described the creative process as fundamentally dependent on what he called the unconscious incubation period. The phase in which the creative problem, the question, the challenge, the unresolved material, is held in the unconscious, below the level of conscious effort, while something deeper than the conscious mind works on it. This phase cannot be forced, cannot be optimized, cannot be accelerated by more thinking, more research, more deliberate effort. It requires only one thing: space. The specific, unstructured, non-productive space in which the unconscious can do its work without interference from the conscious mind's need to manage and direct and produce. The greatest creative minds in history have known this intuitively. Newton described his most important insights, arriving not during periods of concentrated effort, but in the unstructured moments afterward. Einstein famously spoke of the role of play and wandering in his theoretical work. Virtually every serious creative practitioner, in every field, describes some version of the same phenomenon. The breakthrough arrives when they stop trying. Not because effort is irrelevant, the effort is essential to loading the problem, but because the solution itself arrives from a level of the psyche that effort cannot access. And it arrives only when the conscious mind is quiet enough to receive it. Boredom, genuine, unrelieved, unmedicated boredom, is the condition that most reliably produces this quiet. The person who has eliminated boredom from their life has not become more creative. They have become more busy. And busyness and creativity are not the same thing. They are, in many cases, direct opposites. 5. The identity that forms in silence. Here is what nobody tells you about constant stimulation. It prevents something more fundamental than creativity from forming. It prevents identity. Jung understood the development of genuine identity, what he called individuation, as a process that requires, as one of its essential conditions, genuine encounter with the self. Not the performed self, not the social self, not the self as it presents in relationships or professional contexts or on any platform. The self as it actually is, when there is no audience, no performance requirement, no stimulus shaping the response. The self in genuine silence. Most people have not met this self in years, because every moment that might have produced the encounter has been preemptively filled. And the identity that forms without this encounter is not really an identity at all. It is a collection of reactions to external stimuli, preferences shaped by algorithms, opinions absorbed from feeds, values inherited from whatever content happened to be most pervasive in the consumed environment. This is not who you are. This is who the noise has assembled in the space where you would have been. Jung's most urgent observation about the modern condition, which he was already diagnosing in the early 20th century, long before its current extreme, was this: the person who never encounters themselves in genuine silence does not know who they are. They know what they respond to. They know what they consume. They know what the algorithm has learned to serve them. But who they actually are, what they actually think, what they actually value, what they actually want from the brief window of consciousness available to them, this remains unknown. Not because it doesn't exist, because it has never been given the conditions in which it could surface. 6. What happens to the shadow in constant stimulation? Jung's concept of the shadow, everything suppressed, denied, and hidden because it is incompatible with the conscious self-image, becomes, in conditions of constant stimulation, uniquely dangerous. Because the shadow does not disappear when it is not faced. It grows more pressurized, more insistent, more likely to erupt in the moments when the stimulation fails to fully suppress it. And constant stimulation is, among other things, one of the most efficient shadow suppression systems ever created. Every notification is a redirection of attention away from interior discomfort. Every scroll is a microdose of novelty that relieves, temporarily, the pressure of unexamined feeling. Every piece of consumed content is a moment in which the interior does not have to be faced. This is why the phone reaches for itself at 3 in the morning. Not because there is anything useful there, but because what wakes you at 3 in the morning, the unresolved, the unprocessed, the unacknowledged, is precisely the material the phone has been successfully preventing from surfacing during the day. And at 3 in the morning, when the defenses are down and the stimulation has momentarily lapsed, it arrives. Jung would say, this is the shadow announcing that it has not been given sufficient attention. And the prescription is not a better sleep routine or a blue light filter. The prescription is the willingness to face, during the waking hours, what keeps arriving in the dark. Boredom, genuine, sustained, unrelieved boredom, is one of the primary conditions in which this facing becomes possible. Not because boredom is comfortable, because boredom is honest. It removes the layer of stimulation that allows the dishonesty to continue. 7. The specific things boredom builds. Not as theory, as observable, documented psychological reality. Boredom builds the capacity for sustained attention. The ability to stay with one thing, one idea, one relationship, one problem, for long enough that depth becomes possible. This capacity is not innate, it is built through practice. And the primary practice is the repeated experience of sitting with discomfort, including the discomfort of having nothing to consume, without immediately seeking relief. The person who has never practiced this has an attention span calibrated to the scroll, moving constantly, touching nothing deeply, consuming at the speed that prevents any single thing from landing. Boredom builds tolerance for uncertainty. The restlessness of genuine boredom is, at its core, the discomfort of not knowing what comes next, of not having the next stimulation provided, of having to wait, without assurance that anything worth waiting for is coming. This tolerance, the capacity to remain present in conditions of uncertainty without immediately seeking relief, is one of the most practically valuable psychological capabilities a human being can develop. It is the foundation of patience, of genuine listening, of the ability to stay in difficult situations long enough for them to resolve, rather than fleeing into distraction the moment they become uncomfortable. Boredom builds genuine preference. Here is something the algorithm industry has correctly identified and is actively working to prevent. When you are bored, genuinely, sustainedly bored, you begin to discover what you actually want. Not what the feed has trained you to want. Not what the recommendation engine has learned predicts your engagement. What you actually, genuinely, independently want. This is dangerous information for any system that depends on your continued engagement. It is essential information for any human being trying to build a life that is actually theirs. Boredom builds the capacity for genuine solitude. Jung considered the capacity for genuine solitude, the ability to be alone with yourself without needing to escape from what you find there, as one of the marks of genuine psychological development. It is built through the repeated experience of sitting in the discomfort of your own company until it becomes something else. Not comfortable exactly, but familiar, and eventually, genuinely nourishing. The person who cannot be alone, who cannot tolerate even brief genuine silence, is not socially gifted. They are psychologically dependent on external stimulus, on other people's energy, on the constant provision of something outside themselves to fill the space where their own interior should be. Boredom is the practice that builds the capacity for solitude, and solitude is the condition in which the self becomes known. 8. The 7 practices of productive boredom. Not as asceticism, not as deprivation, as the deliberate cultivation of the condition that the unconscious requires. Practice 1. Establish one daily period of genuine emptiness. 15 minutes. 20. The length matters less than the consistency. No phone, no podcast, no music, no substitute stimulus, just time with no content in it. Notice every impulse to fill it. Do not fill it. The impulse itself is the information. Practice 2. Take one walk per week, without anything in your ears. Not a fitness walk, not a productivity walk. A walk with no destination and no content. Just the world, and your own unmediated encounter with it. Notice what arrives when nothing is competing with its arrival. Practice 3. Let the commute be silent. If you commute, by car, by public transport, by foot, give at least 2 commutes per week to genuine silence. The commute, historically, was one of the primary spaces in which the unconscious delivered its material. The podcast has eliminated this delivery system with remarkable efficiency. Restore it. Practice 4. Wake up slowly. Before the phone, before the news, before any content enters, 10 minutes of lying still, or sitting, or walking slowly, in which the membrane between sleep and waking is honored. This membrane is one of the primary channels between unconscious and conscious. The phone, reached for immediately, closes it before anything can come through. Practice 5. Sit with a single question instead of searching for the answer. When a genuine question arises, about a decision, a direction, a relationship, resist the immediate impulse to search. Sit with it instead. For a day, for several days. Bring it into your periods of silence, into your walks, into the space before sleep. The unconscious processes questions differently than search engines do, and its answers, when they arrive, are more specifically tailored to your actual situation than anything a search can provide. Practice 6. Allow your creative work to have an incubation period. When you are stuck, when the work has hit a wall, when the problem will not resolve, stop working on it consciously, not permanently, temporarily. Go for a walk. Do something entirely unrelated. Create genuine space around the problem. And then, pay attention to what arrives in that space. This is not procrastination. It is the application of Jung's understanding of the creative process to your actual practice. Practice 7. Let children be bored. If you have children, this is perhaps the most important practice on the list. The instinct to immediately relieve a child's boredom, to provide the screen, the activity, the entertainment, is an instinct that, however kindly motivated, deprives the child of the primary developmental experience. Bored children invent things, create things, discover things about their own minds and preferences and capabilities that structured activity cannot reveal. The capacity for genuine solitude, genuine creativity, genuine self-knowledge, all of it is built, in childhood, in the unstructured, unmediated, unentrained space of genuine boredom. Protect it, for them, while you still can. 9. The final truth. Jung wrote something that has stayed with me since I first encountered it. He wrote that the most important question a human being can ask is not what they should do, it is what the psyche is trying to do. Because the psyche, the full, deep, unconscious psyche, is not passive. It is not waiting for instruction. It has its own direction, its own intelligence, its own extraordinary capacity for the specific kind of processing that produces genuine insight, genuine creativity, genuine development. And it is trying, constantly and patiently, to deliver the results of that processing to the conscious mind, through dreams, through the irrational pull toward certain things, through the symptom, through the synchronicity, and through the discomfort of boredom, which is not a signal that the environment has failed. It is a signal that the interior is full, that something has been prepared, processed, made ready,